A cartoon and toy line whose commercial relevance was shorter than the time it took to create it. Despite being developed by some of the most successful creative minds from around the world, it was lost in a crowd of cartoons and toy lines all doing the same thing at the same time. It was completely different and yet no different at all. Hi, I'm Dan Larson and this is the history of Centurions. We have previously covered Centurions back in March of 2018. We're revisiting it here to tell a more comprehensive story, to better contextualize the very, very brief phenomenon, to dive deeper into a world where a dog can not only be armed with missiles, but pull the trigger himself. Centurions is an animated series that ran 65 episodes over one season in 1986, a perfect demonstration of the symbiotic relationship between toys and cartoons that did everything right except sell more toys and engage more viewers than the competition. In the near future, Doc Terror and his cyborg companion Hacker unleash their forces to conquer Earth. Only one force can stop this evil. The handful of brave men in specially created exo-frames that can be transported anywhere to fuse with incredible assault weapon systems beamed down from the space station's sky vault, becoming man and machine power extreme. Max Ray, brilliant sea operations commander, Jake Rockwell, rugged land operations specialist, Ace McCloud, daring air operations expert, Shadow, the dog with missile launchers and permission to use them. Whatever the challenge, they are ready. The Centurions. Thank you to 80stees.com for sponsoring this video. Click the link in the description below and use code TOYGALAXY to get 30% off your order today. What's the first thing that pops into your head when I say the 1980s or the 1990s? Don't think about it, just say it. 1, 2, 3, Rubik's Cube. Yes, they have that, or they had that, or they will have that. 80stees.com is constantly refreshing their inventory with officially licensed t-shirts featuring characters, quotes, and logos from cartoons, comics, TV shows, movies, wrestling, and music from the 1970s through the 2000s. So while I can't guarantee that everything you can think of will be in stock, I can guarantee that you'll always be surprised by the range of their selection. 80stees.com has something for everyone. Your favorite heroes like Batman, Spider-Man, Mega Man, Deadpool, and Wolverine, Voltron, both Lion and Vehicle, Star Wars, Stargate, old and older Battlestar Galactica, Motley Crue, Biz Markie, Pink Floyd, and Jimi Hendrix. Find the shirt that's right for you, the one that speaks to your interests, and lets the world know that there's no bigger fan of scratch and sniff stickers, Spam, or Kellogg's Fruit Loops than you. And you can prove it because you're wearing the shirt. Click the link below and use code TOYGALAXY for 30% off your order today. Again, that's code TOYGALAXY for 30% off your order. And thanks again to 80stees.com. In 1968, the cartoon industry was turned on its head by an advocacy group called Action for Children's Television, or ACT. Members of ACT were concerned about the amount of violence depicted in children's television programming, specifically cartoons. Furthermore, they were concerned about the relationship between cartoons and advertisements. Studies showed that it was difficult for kids to understand where a cartoon ended and a commercial began. ACT successfully worked with the U.S. Congress and Federal Communications Commission to exert pressure on networks to prevent advertising products to children during cartoons, and to discontinue violent programs like the Herculoids, Space Ghost, Langley and the Lighthouse Kids, Birdman and the Galaxy Trio, and the Fantastic Four, among others. Those shows that got canceled needed to be replaced with something non-violent, something like The Archie Show, produced by Filmation, which premiered on CBS in 1968, a lighthearted comedy about teenagers in a band. Fred Silverman was the vice president of daytime programming at CBS who put The Archie Show on the air. Silverman reached out to Hanna-Barbera, the studio that produced a lot of the violent shows that were canceled, and asked them to essentially use The Archies as a template for a lighthearted comedy about teenagers in a band. From there, Hanna-Barbera writers Joe Ruby and Ken Spears, in cooperation with Silverman, developed Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Scooby-Doo was a hit which encouraged Ruby and Spears to seek promotions to associate producers within Hanna-Barbera. When those requests were denied, they sought opportunities elsewhere. The duo landed at rival animation studio DePatie Freleng, where they became associate producers and created shows like 1972's The Barkleys and 1973's Bailey's Comets. At CBS, Silverman employed Ruby and Spears as writers and story consultants for projects like the live-action Planet of the Apes series in 1974, as well as supervisors of CBS's Saturday morning lineup. In 1975, Silverman left CBS to become president of entertainment at rival network ABC. Ruby and Spears followed Silverman to ABC, where they created shows like Electra Woman and Dinah Girl and the Croft Super Show. In 1977, under the guidance of ABC, Joe Ruby and Ken Spears started their own studio called Ruby Spears, technically a division of Filmways, the studio that produced shows like Mr. Ed, The Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres, and The Addams Family. Ruby Spears was a direct shot at Hanna-Barbera from ABC, intended to be a rival to the legendary studio and maybe keep production costs down throughout the industry. However, 4 years later, in 1981, Ruby Spears was purchased by Taft Broadcasting, who also owned Hanna-Barbera, reuniting the two under the same corporate banner, Taft Broadcasting, till all are one. At the same time, President Ronald Reagan appointed Mark Fowler as head of the FCC. Together they slashed regulations, undoing all the work Action for Children's Television had done since the late 60s in the name of protecting kids from the influence of corporations in the name of entertainment. It opened the floodgates to cartoons specifically made for kids in cooperation with toy manufacturers, not only blurring the line between cartoon and commercial, but merging the two into one entity. Reagan and Fowler believed it was up to the free market to decide what was appropriate for children's health and well-being, not the federal government. In 1982, Hasbro was already tiptoeing around the existing regulations. They used animated commercials to promote Marvel Comics that were based on their toys. It was an extra step that was technically not illegal. When deregulation occurred, there was no longer a need to tiptoe around anything. Within 2 years, cartoon producers gleefully indulged in partnerships with licensed characters to capitalize on trends in pop culture. Hanna-Barbera and Namco's Pac-Man, Filmation and Mattel's Masters of the Universe, Marvel and Hasbro's G.I. Joe, and Transformers. Ruby Spears themselves were responsible for multiple shows, including Rubik the Amazing Cube, Mr. T, and Alvin and the Chipmunks. Children's television was increasingly saturated with violent cartoons that existed for the explicit purpose of exploiting kids' inability to tell where the cartoon ended and the commercial began. Having an animated series was part of the brand development from the beginning, an essential part of promoting toy lines like 1985's Robotics, Masks, Thundercats, and Sectars, a Ruby Spears production based on the toys from Coleco. Kenner Toys, who since 1977 had become one of the largest toy companies in the world on the strength of their Star Wars action figures, was looking for replacements. Since 1983 and the end of the Star Wars movies, they had actively worked to diversify their offerings as subsequent Star Wars media, including both Ewoks and Droids cartoons, failed to maintain interest in the toys. On top of that, Kenner was newly independent. Along with Parker Brothers, both companies were spun off from parent company General Mills in 1985 to form a new company, Kenner Parker Toys. It was in Kenner's best interest to make sure that 1986 was the year of Kenner. Kenner partnered with Ruby Spears to develop a toy line and animated series at the same time, just as they had in 1985 with Deke for Mask. In 1986, Mask was headed into a second season of the animated series and a second year on toy shelves. Centurions began with a high-tech concept, man and machine, a force for good pit against a force of evil, both utilizing cutting-edge technology in the battle for supremacy. The former as a tool to be mastered, the latter as a means of self-improvement integrated as an extension of the self, the next step in human evolution. Early concepts for the animation included Ring of Fire, centered around a three-man tech team of Army, Navy, and Air Force operatives named Case Kittredge, Dixon Brown, and Jim Earhart, battling against the evil Dr. Severod Rom. Rom was a two-time Nobel Prize-winning geneticist and Regenics expert who survived a plane crash by merging himself with his supercomputer creation, Syntax. Set in the year 1997, a series of volcanoes encircling the Pacific Ocean known as the Ring of Fire simultaneously erupted, turning everything west of the Rocky Mountains and the Pacific Shelf itself into a molten mass of lava. Rom, driven insane by his reinvention as a half-computer monster, attempts to rule not only the inhospitable wasteland of lava, but the entire world thereafter. That pitch was later refined into United We Stand. In this version, an evil genius named Half Mad wants to create a master race for the 21st century by fusing man and machine together. The Global Defense Unit, or GDU, recruits 3 members to be fitted with high-capability exo-frames specially fitted to each individual. The 3 men are brought to a secret underground base near Earth's capital, screened and informed of their selection and specialized appointments, fitted with their exo-frames and trained in their use. They are 100% men using machines. They are the 21st Centurions.
Kids, how would you like to see 2 exciting new animated adventures before anyone else? You can, cause next week is Sneak a Peek Week on Channel 11. First at 3 o'clock, Sectars, humanoid warriors and insectoid fighters protect planet Symbion from the dark domain. Then at 3:30, get your sneak preview of the Centurions. High-tech warriors defend Earth from sinister Doc Terror. Sectars and the Centurions. If you watch them and you like them, we'll bring them back. Watch Sneak a Peek Week all next week, 3 to 4 o'clock on KTVT Channel 11.
The version that became Centurions as it aired featured concepts and character designs provided by some of the most talented and influential designers of all time, including legendary Marvel and DC Comics artist Jack Kirby, responsible for co-creating nearly half of the Marvel Universe from the Fantastic Four to the X-Men and the Avengers. Legendary Marvel and DC Comics artist Gil Kane, responsible for co-creating DC's Green Lantern and the Atom, and Marvel's Iron Fist and Morbius the Living Vampire. And Norio Shioyama, an animator, illustrator, and character designer employed by Studio 7, a division of Sunrise, and the animation studio in Japan that produced the animation for Centurions. Sunrise was founded in 1972 and went on to produce the foundational real robot epic Mobile Suit Gundam in 1979. Shioyama had previously worked on Sunrise animated series like Daitarn 3 in 1978, Fang of the Sun Dogram in 1981, and Armored Trooper Votams in 1983. Centurions was Studio 7's first major work. The opening narration was provided by William Woodson, who also did the narration for Super Friends and Battle of the Planets, as well as character voices like J. Jonah Jameson on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Ron Feinberg played Doc Terror, his henchman Hacker was played by Ed Gilbert. Neil Ross played Ace McCloud, Pat Fraley played Max Ray, and Vince Edwards played Jake Rockwell. Crystal, the Centurions' partner in Skyvault, was played by Diane Pershing. Other notable cast members included B.J. Ward, Dan Gilvezan, Tress McNeil, Alan Oppenheimer, Peter Cullen, and Frank Welker as, I assume, Shadow and every other animal that appeared in the 65-episode run. The man has a distinct bark. A 5-part Centurions miniseries was broadcast April 7th through April 11th, 1986. The regular series kicked off September 22nd with the remaining 59 episodes following thereafter through December 12th, 1986. And that was it! Cancelled after one season, which may sound like a failure, and it may be, but it was a success in terms of completing its original order of 65 episodes, the standard number of episodes needed for daily broadcast syndication, and, not for nothing, a lot of episodes. 65 episodes broke down to one episode every weekday for 13 weeks, or 1/4 of the year, usually September through December, when kids were trapped inside after school watching TV. It was frequently the minimum number for success and the maximum number desired for return on investment. Heck, there are cartoons that are considered far more popular and more culturally impactful that have way fewer episodes. As a weekly series, Scooby-Doo Where Are You ran for 3 seasons but only had 41 episodes. On the other hand, Masters of the Universe only ran one more season than Centurions, but because it was also a daily syndicated show, it has 130 episodes.
That's a lot of He-Man.
If you didn't catch Centurions the first time around or haven't bothered to look it up in the last 4 decades, Warner Archive released Centurions on DVD in 2 parts. Part 1 in July 2015, Part 2 in March 2016. As of this video, they don't appear to be online anywhere legally, but if you know where to look, you can find them internet archivally. The cartoon was only half the mission. The other half was the Centurions toys produced by Kenner. Every new figure line had a gimmick to distinguish itself from every other toy line on the shelf. Holograms, transforming alien robots, rub symbols, cap-firing weapons, cat people, half-naked barbarians. In this case, Kenner's Centurions were larger than most action figure lines on the shelf and featured accessories that could be swapped between figures. More figures and more parts meant more customization. Wave 1 featured the 3 Centurions in their exo-frames with their basic weapons systems. Each figure stood roughly 7.5 inches tall and had a series of ports all over their bodies into which you could plug the modular weapon systems parts. Additional weapon systems were also released. The left and right halves of Doc Terror, Hacker, and the Doom Drone Strafer were all interchangeable as well, and you could supplement your evil forces with the Doom Drone Terrorizer or the Centurions with the Centurion Power Pack. And that was it. Well, in the decades since, a few more weapon systems have surfaced that were intended for release. Some very rare production samples of Seabat for Max Ray and Swingshot for Jake Rockwell have surfaced and are priced accordingly on the secondary market. A second wave of figures to be rolled out for 1987 was designed but never made it to production. It would have featured 2 new Centurions introduced late in the cartoon to refresh the team and the toy line. Rex Charger was the energy specialist and John Thunder was the infiltration expert. There were additional weapon systems for all of the Centurions planned, as well as 2 new horrible creations from Doc Terror. Cybervore, Shark, and Panther, each with the ability to swap halves of their bodies with the other and discharge their own munitions. For the life of me, I don't know why you wouldn't lead with the Cyborg, Shark, and Panther, and not for nothing, but there was a missile-firing dog in the cartoon that never got an action figure. It's like they don't even want it to succeed. That said, if you're jonesing for any Centurions toys and aren't concerned about the legalities of their creation, Ramen Toys has been producing toys that look an awful lot like the Centurions since 2021. Figures that are very strong homages to Ace, Max, Jake, Doc Terror, Hacker, John Thunder, and the Terrorizer drone. Still no missile-launching dog. It's like they don't even want it to succeed. Ruby Spears and Kenner followed the standard playbook on licensing for profit to make sure Centurions would be the next big thing. There were Centurions Golden Books, a board game called Jake Rockwell's Battle to Stop Dr. Terror, and a variety of low-end merch with the Centurions logo slapped on it. There was a 4-issue comic published by DC, a video game called Centurions Power Extreme. Unfortunately, neither were published until 1987, after the Centurions were canceled. Hard to call one small wave of large action figures a success after the amount of time and money spent developing it, especially for it to come and go within a single calendar year, but man, what a tough year to compete. When Centurions arrived on shelves in 1986, they would have been fighting for space with a plethora of other toy lines. Besides holdovers from previous years, like Masters of the Universe, G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Thundercats, there were new lines like Muscle and Humanoids, Laser Tag, Defenders of the Earth, and Rambo, along with the rise of the juggernaut Nintendo Entertainment System. Not to mention Kenner's own lines of toys like Silverhawks, Mask, Superpowers, and the last gasps of Star Wars, and a second season in 1987 would have been even more competition from the likes of Bionic 6, Visionaries, Micro Machines, Captain Power, and the real Ghostbusters. And more, kids were still climbing trees and playing baseball and stuff. Very little of Ruby Spears, Kenner, or the Centurions exists today. Kenner Parker Toys was acquired by Tonka in 1987, who were then acquired by Hasbro in 1991. Ruby Spears' parent company, Taft Broadcasting, was purchased in 1987 by Carl Lindner Jr. and renamed Great American Broadcasting. The Ruby Spears catalog was spun off as RS Holdings in 1991. That catalog and Hanna-Barbera were sold to Turner Broadcasting System, who then merged with Time Warner in 1996. As of this video, our crack investigative team could not uncover any evidence that there is currently any movement on a Centurions revival at any level. Likely due to the nature of the license, but also due to the obscurity of the toy line and cartoon. It wasn't that popular then, and it hasn't become more popular in the 40 years since it completed its 65-episode run. While the toys are technically owned by Hasbro, who purchased Kenner in 1991, the concept is still owned by Ruby Spears, whose library is owned by Warner Brothers. But if it can happen for Silverhawks, who have had new officially licensed toys and comics on shelves right now, maybe it can happen for Centurions. How are we doing for time?
We're okay.
How much tape?
A lot better than last time.
Thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you very much to those of you who already are. Please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/toygalaxy. Several different tiers to address your specific Secret Galaxy content needs. Check out the Secret Galaxy merch shop at secretgalaxy.shop. All merchandise is physically in stock and ready to ship. Links to all of this in the description below. And let us know in the comments down below if you were or are a fan of Centurions. Look, I give it a hard time, but I like the concept of the show and toy line. I definitely watched it, but not nearly as much as I think I watched it. The toys were awesome. I have the vintage figures, and I even have the first run of the Ramen Toys 80s Commanders. I would love to see it come back as a toy line, either standalone or incorporated into something like G.I. Joe Classified, but I'm realistic about the chances of that happening because, as we just talked about, it wasn't that big to begin with.
And that is why I won't do two Centurions.
That's why I won't do 3 shows, yeah.
I won't do it.
2's my max.